If you've ever been disillusioned, disappointed, or discouraged in your search for love, and you know there has to be a better way to find the healthy, soul-filling love you've always longed for, then you've discovered the podcast for you. I know, as Ken's work personally has led me to find the love of my life. So here's your host of Deeper Dating, Ken Page.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Deeper Dating Podcast. I'm Ken Page. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm the author of the best-selling book, Deeper Dating, the creator of the Deeper Dating Intensive, and your host in this podcast. And I'm so glad to be here with you talking about my personal journey, emotionally, spiritually, sexually. I haven't really shared this before, and so it's both exciting and scary to get to do that. And this is going to be part 2. But first, I just want to say that if you are interested in the deeper dating path to healthy love, just go to deeperdatingpodcast.com. And there you can get a copy of my free ebook, which is very rich and full of the 5 greatest keys to creating deeper intimacy in your life. And you can see transcripts of every I'm going to do that part again. And you can read transcripts of every single one of my over 200 episodes there as well. So, with no further ado, let me jump in back to my story. So, where I left off at the end of the first part was the craziness in that kind of New York City spiritual cult that I was in with Joya and Ramdas and Hilda, and how I left that and was ready to kind of leave my celibate life and leave my vegetarian life and enter into my gay life, because there wasn't really such a place for it there. So I went off to college at that point, and I don't know, I got high a lot. I had wonderful friends, though. This was like this kind of interim period where I was discovering community in a deeper, richer way. I was meeting truly wonderful people who would become lifelong friends. I was in a real hippie school, which New Paltz was at that time. I was taking classes like the spirituality of the Native American Indian and alternative energy sources and poetry writing and having a ball, really loving it. And going into the city every once in a while, going to gay bars a whole bunch, looking for love so hard, looking for sex too. And I found a bunch of sex, but not a bunch of love. I felt like such an outcast. I would stand in front of the disco, and everybody would be wearing their like flashy disco clothes, and they all looked so beautiful, and they'd be like doing the hustle, and I felt like a country bumpkin. God knows I could not do the hustle. And I just felt so shiny in comparison to these gay men. But God, I wanted sex, and God, I wanted love. And I found some relationships, none of which were anything that could last at all. But the ache was there, the hunger was there, and that was the life that I was living. At a certain point, I went on a trip to Europe. I hitchhiked all around Europe. I went to Greece. I went to Mykonos, the gay Mecca. And there in Mykonos, I met Hilda. Hilda, my spiritual teacher, who I talked about in part 1 of this. And it was a pretty intense meeting because she looked at me and she said, "Ken, what happened to you? This glow that you had is gone. It's just gone." This did not make me very happy, but I knew that it was true. I knew that I had given up the beautiful treasure of my spiritual self. I was not meditating. I was afraid to meditate. The feeling of expansion, all of the different feelings were just kind of too scary for me to bear. I had had spiritual experiences during that time that felt so expansive that they put me in a place of absolute terror because they involved such a kind of loss of control. So that's what happened with Hilda. And I knew she was right. But there was not anything that I felt like I could do about it at that time. But I just have another story about Hilda that I want to share. There was a rabbi who I knew from my hometown, really sweet, progressive guy that me and my friends were all friends with in high school. And in later years, I don't remember how I came upon him, but he said to me, Ken, you used to talk about this woman, Hilda, and I was with her when she passed. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I was a chaplain. I was a rabbi in a hospital in New Jersey. And there was this elderly woman, and she said her name was Hilda, and she was a meditation teacher. And I said, I know about you. And she said, yeah. She said, it's my time, and I did not want to do it in this kind of like throng of students and followers. I just wanted peace. So he was with her when she passed. What an amazing story that was. So I finished college. I landed in New York, another absolute gay mecca. I was in graduate school at that point and loving it, loving it, loving it. Intellectually, emotionally, it was just so wonderful. And I discovered this world of sex. And, this was kind of at this point, I guess around 1980, pre-AIDS, there was this magnificent gay renaissance that was happening. That was not only sexuality, but it was writing, it was literature, it was an entire kind of blossoming of a gay culture that was rich and wise. And there was a magazine called Christopher Street that had really important gay writers like Edmund White, and it was just this kind of gorgeous flourishing at that point. And part of that gorgeous flourishing was the world of sex in New York City. And that was kind of, for many of us, it was our entertainment, it was our adventure, it was everything. And it took up a lot of my life for a long time. But in retrospect, I was looking for love that entire time. I mean, I was looking for sex, absolutely, but I had two burning questions that I was using. I didn't have the tools, the emotional tools, to use that world in any kind of wise or conscious way. I was addictive, I was compulsive, I was hungry for love, and this was an absolute playground. So while I did my graduate studies and adored that part of my life, I was living this kind of backroom life at the same time. I remember there was a Chinese restaurant near where I worked, and it was called New Guy Joy. And I thought, oh, that is what I am spending my life looking for these days. That just absolutely captures it. So I was getting so stimulated professionally and intellectually and overstimulated sexually, and discovering this whole world of brunch and clubs that went on forever and ever and ever. And at that point, I was, really a lot more careful about drugs. So we would go to different clubs, and I would go to sleep at like 8 o'clock and wake up at 4 a.m. and get to the club after having breakfast at like maybe 5 o'clock in the morning. And we would dance until noon. Everyone who was there pretty much was stoned out of their mind, but me and my friends, we had this sober way of doing it, and it's a little hard to describe the bliss and the ecstasy and the amazingness of the saint and of this kind of incredible renaissance of beauty. And I remember the first time I discovered these clubs. My friends had been going for years, and I just didn't go. I didn't picture that it was like me. And then I ended up going, and there were thousands of people, and these men all were bodybuilders. They all had their shirts off. They were all so gorgeous. I mean, insanely gorgeous, insanely gorgeous. And I felt proud of being gay. in a very real way, because these men were so beautiful and so cultivated. And that was tremendously exciting to me. And I spent years trying to be a part of that world and failing miserably, because really, and I didn't know this, just like Joya, just like other things, it didn't suit my soul. And I tried to fit in, and I tried to fit in. And that was the story of my romantic life, too. I was attracted to guys who didn't suit my soul, and I tried to make it fit, which is why no relationship lasted past 6 weeks. But God, did I want the relationship. I wanted it so bad. At this point, I was so kind of sucked into the New York City gay world that the thought of leaving, even for a weekend, it just seemed like the worst thing in the world. I was looking for love, and I was in New York City, and the thought of leaving it even for a minute and leaving this search for love and everything else just seemed completely impossible. And I didn't lose complete touch, but I never went upstate anymore to visit my friends from New Paltz. I just could not leave New York City. When I graduated from graduate school, I began to do postgraduate training in body-mind therapy with a teacher named Ilana Rubenfeld. And this opened my world so beautifully and so powerfully. And I was ready to become a therapist, which was the most tremendously magical, privileged, exciting thing in the world. My best friend, Michael, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and I shared an office in New York City, and seeing clients and having an office in Greenwich Village. It was like really run down. It was this carriage house, but it was really funky. Our clients called it the Shrink Palace because it was kind of cruddy, but it was magical, and it was right near Christopher Street, and it was in the village, and we began to do groups for gay men. This was an insight I got that was going to be the way to go, because there was such a hunger in the gay male community for deep, rich bonding. So we formed group after group after group. Our practices built so quickly, and we learned a lot, and we led groups together and built a whole professional life in New York. And then Michael would go upstate after working for a few days in New York. Michael was my dear, dear, dear friend. Michael died of AIDS in 1991, and the story of his passing is a really beautiful one, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But the way my life was working, I had put God and spirituality aside, so there was an aching loneliness inside of me, and I was looking for love, but I did not know how to do it. And so I just ended up disappointed again and again and again, with this very deep, 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 deep down belief that whatever it was that was sexy, whatever it was that could attract a partner, or that line from the Rose, love is only for the lucky and the strong. And I felt like I was not lucky and I was not strong. So I had no healing in that arena. I kept trying to do the same things again and again, and they weren't working. Well, this changed when my sister decided that we were all, me, my dad, my mom, and my sister, were going to go hiking in the Wind River Mountains in Wyoming. I was horrified. I said to my therapist, I have to buy hiking boots. I have to leave New York City. This is just so not me. I resented it infinitely, but we decided together that I was going to give it a shot. So I did. And we went to the Wind River Mountains, and it changed my life. The Wind River Mountains are the most magical, mystical, amazing mountain range in Wyoming. And I remember being with my family and driving through Wyoming, through some small towns, and I said, if they knew that I was gay here, they would hurt me. And my parents said, no, don't think that, don't think that. That was before Matthew Shepard, but I knew that it was true. I knew that it was true. So we went to the Wind River Mountains. We hiked and hiked and hiked, and I wanted to see the Snow Peak Mountains, but we kind of started way before the Snow Peak Mountains. And we hit a place called Lower Sweeney Lake. And I don't know what happened to me there, but I felt the presence of spirit at that lake, and I changed, and I started to meditate. And for the first time, I could feel my sexuality and my spirituality begin to join. But mostly, I felt the magic of God again. At Lower Sweeney Lake, we kept camping. And one night, we all slept under the stars and watched the stars kind of wheeling above us as the night went on. We woke up in the morning, and every one of us had had a dream that captured our deepest stuck place that night under the stars. And my dream was back rooms and guys that I didn't really respect, trying to get them to like me. And then once they liked me, I didn't respect them, and I pulled away. It was kind of, in many ways, the story of my entire romantic life at that time. They were the hot guys to me, but they were not the guys I could spiritually mesh with. Anyway, that was an amazing experience. But we hiked, and finally, on the last day before we had to turn back, we realized that we were not going to make it to the Snow Peak Mountains, which is what I wanted more than anything. So I ran ahead, and I hiked, I ran, and I got to the Snow Peak Mountains. I got up into the snow, and there I was in this mountain, and it was like electric, and I felt the presence of God, finally, and again. I felt like I was charging from a socket of this kind of beautiful electricity, and spirituality came back into my life at that point. It was so powerful that I thought, I need a souvenir, and I asked God to help find me a rock that would capture this feeling that I could have as a memory. Well, I didn't find one. I was trusting my intuition, and I looked, and I finally said, well, there's no rock. I was a changed person. I walked down that mountain with God again after all of this time, and I thought maybe I could meditate without being too frightened. I walked down this mountain. I went back to my family, and I tried to convey to them what I experienced, and they were very wonderful, but they didn't get it. There were no words for what happened for me. I had to go back early. The family, we all left the wilderness, and the family stayed in Wyoming. I had to go back early to get to work. But as I was leaving them and saying goodbye, my sister said to me, Kenny, open your hands. I have something for you. And she placed a rock in my hands, and it was a crystal, and I didn't know what it was, but I felt it, and I immediately felt, and I had never had any experience with crystals or anything like that before. I was, kind of a disbeliever. Anyway, this one, though, I knew captured this new and old relationship with God, which was so precious and so beautiful. I had that crystal up until I lost it for, I think, 16 years, and that was the beginning of going back to meditating. It was the beginning of my spirituality once again. It was around this time that AIDS began, and so much changed. There was such terror. There was such profound betrayal on the part of our government. There was such a clear sense of where we stood and how little we mattered. It was a terrifying time, and I always prayed, Dear God, not me, not Michael. And Michael, my best friend, got AIDS. I was really there for him. At that point, I realized that No, I guess before that, I realized that I needed to be connected with my friends. That what was I doing? And so I began to go upstate. I think I began to go upstate, and I think it was after that. No, it was all around the same time. I'm sorry, the timing is a little confusing to me. But Michael got AIDS, and that was really scary and terrifying. And he was so beautiful and so brave and so amazing. We remained really close. He brought me into a Labor Day retreat. He told me that he was going to be leading a gay men's Labor Day retreat. And I said, oh my God, that is what I want to do. I want to do that more than anything. Can you bring me in? And he did. And he brought me in. And I was a staff member, and then a co-leader, and then a leader, and then a co-leader again of one of the largest, oldest gay men's retreats in the country. And I did this for 25 years. Thank you, Michael, for that too. And I have more stories about Michael. I have so many stories about Michael, but I just want to share that Michael passed in 1991. I was with him, and this amazing, amazing treasure of a man, and a friendship like no other friendship I have ever had in my life. I was there on Michael's last night, and Michael's last words, again and again and again, were open and enthusiastic. He chanted those words in his last minutes, his last hours. He was really uncomfortable before that, really uncomfortable and fidgety and just so awkward and unhappy, and we were in such pain we didn't know what to do. And so we called the hospice nurse, who had told us, call us at any time. So we called her. It was like 4 a.m, and she said, I think he's afraid that he's going to hurt you by leaving. Go in and tell him it's okay. So we went in and we told him that it was okay for him to go. Michael was such a beautiful soul. His partner, Edwin, couldn't say those words. He said, it's okay if you really need to. That was what he could say, but we were saying, it's okay, it's okay. And instantly, Michael calmed down and rested. Michael was an artist and a poet, and his work was so amazing. I've read some of his poems in other podcasts. Anyway, he calmed down. And those were his last words, open and enthusiastic, again and again. My treasure of a friend, Michael. So I came back to New York from Wyoming, a changed person. God was in my heart again. And I started meditating 10 minutes at a time because it just scared me. My experiences were just too intense. 10 minutes at a time, and I began to realize I could meditate again. Marianne Williamson came into my life at this time, and she was a spiritual teacher. I'm sure all of you know her now from what she's doing politically, and, well, just she was super, 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 super famous. But she was such a gift to me because she kind of represented a spirituality that really connected with my culture, was very LGBTQ inclusive, very beautiful, very inspiring. And Yogananda's community, which is called Self-Realization Fellowship, was not. Most specifically, it was not gay welcoming. To this day, they do not bless gay unions, and that was really hard on me. But it was at that point that I decided that I had to learn to do love differently. I had to become a student of my failures. And so I did. I did this with great earnest. I'll do that line again. And so I did. I did this with great earnestness. I found a wonderful therapist. I talked to my friends who seemed like they knew what they were doing better than I did, and I said, teach me what I'm doing wrong. Teach me what I have to change. Because I knew that I was so locked into a certain type, which really was not going to particularly work for me, the characterological type, which was cocky and arrogant and tough in a way that I never was and always felt I should be. And I began to learn. I began to learn how to do things differently. It was around that time that I had an insight that came from Bruce. I mentioned in the last part that there was an insight that changed my life, and this is what it was. I was attracted to the bad boys. But I remembered that I had fallen so deeply in love with Bruce, who was the epitome of goodness and honesty and humility. And I thought, oh my God, I have another capacity here. I can be attracted to goodness. I could maybe cultivate that attraction. And that was the beginning of so many changes, and the beginning of this concept of attractions of deprivation and inspiration. So at these gay men's retreats, I began to teach workshops on loneliness and love and integrating sexuality and spirituality. And men flocked to these workshops. They would fill the biggest rooms in the retreat when I led them, because there was such a profound hunger for this. So I was teaching and learning at the same time. There's going to be a third part to this, and in that third part, I am going to talk about what I learned, the things I learned as I transformed my sexual expression and my ability to love, how I became a father, and how I met my husband. And those will be part of part 3. Thank you so much for being with me through these stories, and I look so forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Deeper Dating Podcast. And if you like, you can go to deeperdatinggifts.com to receive my free ebook with so much of the things that I learned and now teach along the way. Thanks so much.
And that's it for today's episode of Deeper Dating. Be sure to go to deeperdatingpodcast.com, as Ken has a few more gifts for you. Then join us on the next episode.